everybody, I'm Kate Cass. Welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about My Little Pony. A while back, I was watching this video essay by Anthony Gramigula on the Lilo and Stitch remake. This is going somewhere, I promise. In it, he argues that one of the reasons for that movie's success, despite how critically divisive it was, is because there's not a lot of entertainment these days catered to kids, which I absolutely agree with. I could rant about that for a good while. But there was one part of his argument that stuck with me. One of the things he claimed caused this problem is My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and its humongous adult fan base. Yep, bronies are the reason the Minecraft movie made nearly $1 billion.
Oh, dang.
Okay, that's an exaggeration. Here's an excerpt of what he actually said.
Now, my personal pet theory, and you can argue this is not super accurate or what have you, is this trend of the decline of children's media. It really started with My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. The older people were the ones who paid for all the merchandise, who showed up at the cons, who would watch religiously. And the show increasingly catered to this older audience. They included jokes referencing The Big Lebowski, for example. What 4-year-old girl is going to know what The Big Lebowski is? But 35-year-old man? Oh, he'll get the joke. He'll think it's hilarious. See, that's the problem. The show started to move away and shift away from its target demographic. And as a result, it left kids behind in favor of adult audiences. My Little Pony rapidly shifted gears within the first year of release, shifting from a show aimed for young kids to maybe something more adult-oriented. And that decision, I think, was detrimental to the animation industry as a collective whole.
Now, I want to put up right up front, I love and respect Anthony as a creator and an analyst a lot. That said, I think this is an incredibly faulty argument. There is very little evidence given in this segment of the video to be critical of one of the most unexpected pop culture phenomena of the last 20 years. However, it did get me thinking, how much did Bronies influence G4 of My Little Pony? The team behind the show and Hasbro knew we were watching. Did they try catering it towards us instead of the kids it was meant for? To quickly set the stage for anyone new and to be transparent about my biases, where do I stand on My Little Pony Friendship is Magic? Meh, it's okay, I guess. Yes, I identify as a brony.
I know. Can you believe it?
I started watching MLP in late 2012 when I had just turned 19. Despite being a little girl once upon a time, I had no interest in the pastel ponies before, but like many before me, I got curious to see what the big deal was with this version. It is now one of my favorite shows of all time. It is one of the first things people associate with me. I use this Pony OC to represent myself in most online spaces. I saw the My Little Pony movie in theaters. I own pony merch. I have interacted in many brony fan spaces, have admired and been appalled by many different fan works. I have made several dedicated videos on the main show and fan projects that I felt deserved recognition and analysis. I'm currently on the team for a My Little Pony fan project, The Chronicles of Dr. Hove. Subscribe now. I've written editorials for the leading fan website, Equestria Daily. In fact, this video will probably be posted on there. And I've even made some friends in the community. I'm probably coming at this from the exact opposite perspective of Ant, so maybe I'm part of the problem, but that just made me more curious about this. This small fragment of a video essay that's barely related to the overall point that I couldn't stop thinking about. Did bronies influence how G4 of My Little Pony was made? Did we impact this thing we love? And was it for the better or for the worse? I couldn't fathom hurting something that was so important to me, but I was ready to grapple with that. Now, for the sake of this discussion, we're just going to talk about how bronies as viewers and creators influence the main show. The fandom itself is a different can of worms altogether, with a lot of highs and lows and crimes. I don't think I could tackle that one, not in a way I'd be happy with anyway. This is just about MLP itself, where it started, what happened in between, and how who was watching affected it. One other thing with this topic. The only piece of evidence Anthony points to for his argument that the show started steering more towards the adults watching is the Big Lebowski ponies. This appearance is from the episode Slice of Life, and this is not the first time I've seen this episode used to make this argument, so because of that, we're gonna put a pin in it for now. We'll talk about it much later, but there's much more to this discussion than that specific episode. And Anthony, if by some bizarre chance you stumble across this video, I hope this doesn't come off as an annoying response. I mean no ill will. Even with a flawed argument, this really inspired a discussion I want to have. If you haven't checked out his channel yet, please do so. He's made some of the most thoughtful analysis videos I've seen on this platform in a while. Big fan, I promise. Alright, let's dive in. Let's start with how we got here. What was MLP like when it started? From what I've been able to glean from past generations of My Little Pony in the 13 years since I've decided this is a part of my life now, G4 takes inspiration mainly from G1, with low-stakes adventures interrupted often by fantasy-fueled quests solved with the powers of rainbows and friendship, and minus the human characters. For now, anyway. The show opens with a two-part adventure where the fate of Equestria hangs in the balance, our main cast is acquainted with each other, and then assemble to save their home. But after that, it's mainly down-to-earth slice-of-life stories that occasionally has other magical creatures to incite a conflict for the characters to face. Something that is clear right away is that Friendship is Magic is an homage to the classic era of My Little Pony, while being a complete overhaul at the same time. The My Little Pony brand was not in a good place when the show started. G3 is widely regarded as the worst generation of MLP, and that's not even getting into the brain-rotting G3.5.
Scootaloo? Do you want to join our tea party?
Yikes.
Unlike, say, Transformers, which also had an acclaimed cartoon running at the time, but it wasn't keeping the franchise alive. For MLP, they needed to get back to basics while appealing to a new generation. And to appeal to kids nowadays, you gotta put in some real effort. The original showrunner, Lauren Faust, approached this generation drawing from stories and adventures she made up with her own ponies as a kid. And to appeal to the kids you want to buy your toys, that seems like the best place to start. It's really easy to tell when a lot of effort goes into a creative project. It resonates, even subconsciously, like how the character designs are much more appealing. They use the same baseline body type for most of the ponies, like in generations past, but the details they added were much more distinct, and the body type was cute and charming. With smaller muzzles, big anime eyes, and more distinguishing features for the main characters and their manes and accessories. Passing the silhouette test with flying colors and making it easier for casual viewers or parents to tell which pony is which, as well as more expressive movements. Some characters have specific ways of moving, like how Pinkie Pie bounces everywhere, or how Rainbow Dash is almost always flying and rarely touches the ground. Traits not shared with every pony else. Details like that go a long way to conveying the thought and care of the series. They were using similar character archetypes that MLP had used in the past, but knew how to give them a bit more life and vigor. It was still a show about the hobbies of girls and the virtues of friendship, but it was much more sincere and less flowery. They had moments of self-awareness to keep the parents watching from rolling their eyes, and they made sure this was a world worth caring about by building up friendships organically with all their pros and cons, bonding moments and obstacles that might be mirroring what the kids watching could be going through with their own friends. So because the show was well thought out to make sure kids in 2010 would want to watch it, when some people in their teens and 20s happen to be channel surfing, stumble across it and realize, hey, this isn't like the My Little Pony I knew. This is actually really good. Curiosities are going to be heightened, and people are gonna tune in. Really, the key to Friendship is Magic's initial success is that it was just a good show. It's that simple. For the things that might have specifically appealed to the older viewers, there was all that thought and care I've mentioned, but there was definitely parts of the show, even early on, that didn't specifically cater to an older audience, but spoke to them. The humor early on is at times reminiscent of more classic cartoons, with the slapstick of Looney Tunes sometimes recreating jokes point for point, and even delving into the surreal as kids' cartoons from the 90s onward tended to do, but might be unexpected for this series specifically. How expressive the animation was, especially for a cartoon animated in Flash in 2010, also contributed to something that really made early MLP fandom famous. Memes. So many memes, never-ending memes. There was so much variety because the show was constantly offering great new expressions and one-liners to work with. Sometimes from the most random, one-off things.
Now I know how to call a chicken.
Don't
Skittle-oo!
tell me.
Skittle-oo! Come
How did that become such a big meme? Your fandom is just so weird.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how much of a role music had to play in MLP's success. I can make a whole separate video about this, but the songs in Friendship is Magic were in the same camp of, wow, I didn't expect this to actually be this good. The episode Winter Wrap-Up was famous for selling people on the show, partly because it has the first ensemble musical number. And it's a bop. On a more intricate level, the world of Equestria was really one that captured the imagination, presented as a thriving fantasy world full of magical creatures of all kinds, not just ponies, making people curious about the land these ponies inhabit, something the show will play more into in future seasons. I think the biggest fascination of people watching those early episodes from a lore standpoint is the story of Princess Celestia, Princess Luna, and the rise and fall of Nightmare Moon. This story is actually the first thing we see on the show, and it's got it all. A thriving femtocracy, sibling rivalries, bitter betrayal from deep-seated insecurity, and an ultimate millennia-long tragedy. What an opener. It was far more engaging than anyone expected, and it's so smart that it's the first story the show tells you. Are there more like it? What else could they have to offer? Guess I'll stick around and find out.
What? You fall into it.
There is one more thing that I think might have helped bring in the older audience. The protagonists are much more relatable to them than in generations past. The main six are coded more as young adults. They all have different jobs, homes, and responsibilities, facing typical problems for a show like this, but one still believable for some pony in that stage of their life. Applejack helps run the family business and maintain the farm, Rainbow Dash aspires to become a famous athlete, Pinkie Pie lives far from home and has a job she loves, but her true passion is party planning, which she likely does for fun and fun alone. Rarity is a small business owner with plans to expand, Fluttershy does volunteer work in a field she's comfortable and passionate in, and Twilight is a student just looking to learn and improve her magic. It's a good variety of positions, passions, and ambitions that can fulfill a fantasy for kids and connect with adults who might have similar goals and responsibilities. It also probably helps viewers outside of little kids connect with the friendship lessons in each episode. For most of Friendship with Magic, it's a lot of the typical stuff. You know, don't dismiss things you don't understand, be grateful for what you have, learn to communicate with your feelings, don't be racist, the usual. But the way MLP depicts these lessons definitely resonated with an older audience. Like in Applebook season, where Applejack overworks herself because she's too proud to ask for help. The dangers of stretching yourself too thin is a common lesson in kid shows, but it's the kind of message that gets much more relevant the older you get, where pride and obligations increase over time. Or Suited for Success, where Rarity offers to make dresses for all of her friends and goes against her instincts as a designer to please them. This one is meant to be a lesson for the rest of the girls to appreciate a friend's hard work and to, well,
You shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth.
but I swear to you, every artist or creative professional I know who has watched this episode relates to Rarity here. Stuck between pleasing the client and being trusted to do what you're being paid to do. It's really well done. These are all things MLP had going for it back in season 1. The stuff that was entertaining and educational for its intended younger demographic, but with its writing and presentation connected with teens and adults and kept them coming back. A well-made combination of style and substance. Season 2 was probably the first season produced where the crew and company were aware of the older fandom they'd garnered. Perhaps the first major sign of them doing something specifically because of Brony reactions is the return of Princess Luna. See, originally Luna was only planned to appear in the first episode and then never again, because the higher-ups felt she would have been too scary for the younger viewers since she used to be a bad guy. A sentiment that will be wild in hindsight the further we go into the series.
Manipulated an entire town into giving up their talents so they wouldn't think they were special.
Turned an entire school into my own personal zombie army in hopes of conquering a distant pony world.
Wow, we are a really forgiving group.
But the two sisters were some of the most intriguing characters in the fandom, and Luna in particular might have been the show's most popular character at the time. So her grand return, and inexplicable redesign, was likely due to her overwhelming popularity in the Brony fandom. Luna would continue to be very popular, and every appearance from her would be met with excitement until she was just as constant a presence as Celestia, something that likely wouldn't have happened otherwise. But season 2 mainly did more of what worked in season 1. More expressive animation, lessons that can resonate with any demographic, lots more songs, but the vibe was generally the same, with a couple of nods to stuff the fandom was developing on their own, specifically the prominence of a certain wool-eyed mare. Perhaps the biggest deviation in season 2 is the season finale, A Canterlot Wedding, which is kind of an interesting episode to look at through the lens of this particular discussion, because it's a kind of mesh of the toyetic for little girls side of the show, and the compelling but still emotionally driven fantasy series older viewers were looking for. A Canterlot Wedding exists because the royal wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton happened the same year, and Hasbro wanted to get in on the hype. Admittedly, some bronies don't like this episode because the circumstances of it feel really contrived and the villain's plan doesn't make a lot of sense, but others got swept away in the excitement of the whole affair. There's twists and conspiracy and betrayal and full-on battle sequences. There were fight and chase sequences before this, but nothing remotely like this. A Canterlot Wedding was presented as much more of an event event episode than anything that had come before. Season 1 technically has 2 finales, sort of. The actual finale, Best Night Ever, which was foreshadowed in previous episodes, but is mainly a standalone lighthearted romp, and the Season 2 premiere, which featured a powerful villain in Discord, but who's mainly there to test the bonds of the newly formed friend group rather than be combated by force. This was apparently intended to be the original Season 1 finale, which makes a lot of sense thematically, and if you look at how the animation very obviously improves in the following episode. I don't know why it's not the finale either, but there you go. My point is, while the direction and purpose of the show didn't change much at all in Season 2, they were definitely more ambitious and took some more risks, with tackling tougher subjects and even higher stakes action sequences. Signs that they could tell that their demographic was larger than they anticipated and attempting to appease them all. But then came Season 3, which was only half as long as the previous two. Conventional wisdom hypothesized that this was because this would get the show to the minimum number of episodes required to syndicate it, back when that mattered. If Friendship is Magic hadn't become such a phenomenon, it very likely would have ended here. Now, at this point in time, MLP was received very positively in the community. There were dud episodes here and there and not so popular characters, but no large objections for the most part. That changed with 2 major decisions made during Season 3, Twilight's ascension to princesshood, and the announcement of Equestria Girls, which both had very obvious motivators to the older viewers watching. And bronies really don't like being reminded that the thing they really, really love is at the end of the day a glorified toy commercial. I include myself when I say that, by the way, or at least me at 19. I hated the idea of Twilight going through something so major just to sell princess toys, or turning the girls human and sending them to high school just to compete with Monster High. Since then, my attitude on both has changed. I wrote a whole editorial on how Magical Mystery Cure changed how I engage with TV, and Equestria Girls was kind of fun, even if the first movie is not that good. But here's the thing, regardless of the disapproval from the older viewers, they showed up. Everyone in every demographic did. These were both incredibly successful moves for MLP. So successful, it propelled the show to keep going. Season 4 and 5 probably have the most evidence that the crew and Hasbro were trying to reach out to this unexpected adult audience they had. This is also where Slice of Life happened, but like I said, we'll talk about that later. The main thing is the larger emphasis on ongoing story arcs. Foreshadowing and building up to big events was nothing new for the show. They were doing it as early as Season 1 with the Grand Galloping Gala. But from this point on, most seasons of the show will have several hints or dedicated episodes foreshadowing larger event episodes or more obvious multiple episode character arcs. Season 4 had 4 ongoing storylines, for crying out loud. As it got the green light to continue on after its syndication requirement, there was a different feel to certain areas of the show. Humor centered more around millennia-era references, a higher focus on bringing back fan-favorite characters and long speculated on areas of the world, and the first thing any brony will send you when you say that MLP is just a kid show, the Twilight and Tyrek fight, where Twilight faces the villain of the Season 4 finale in a battle very reminiscent of
Dragon Ball Z.
Now she's throwing Galick Guns and Kamehamehas at Tyrek like she's Goku and Vegeta.
The references are over 9,000. 9,000.
This is where people who make the argument Anthony did have a point. This kind of stuff does feel out of place in Friendship is Magic, as a heavier emphasis was put on them. None of these things are bad on their own. To be completely transparent, the episode where that fight takes place is my favorite episode of the show, because stuff like that is what I loved watching as a little girl. But when people try to defend their hobbies by showing clips like this in isolation, it can paint an inaccurate picture. Because here's the thing, while there was much more of stuff like this from Season 4 onward, moments like this are not as frequent as these constantly shared clips might make you think. MLP would have more action and fight scenes, some pretty damn cool, but nothing on this scale ever again, not even in the movie. And reference-based humor certainly got more frequent as the show went on, but like most projects with multiple writers and creative people involved, it encompassed all eras from classic film and theater to more recent blockbusters and anime. If you look at the show on an episode-by-episode basis, the episodic stories didn't change all that much. much. Some messages were more nuanced than others, some episodes were good and some were bad, some highlighted the characters well and some didn't. Even the introduction of story arcs was more likely in response to trends that were developing on television, especially animated television in the 2010s, with the rise of shows like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and Gravity Falls. MLP was simply keeping up with what the kids were watching. As time went on, Friendship is Magic made healthy attempts to remain relevant, making as much meaningful change as they could to make each season worth watching for something new and exciting by introducing new characters, fleshing out classics, and expanding the world of Equestria without the classic twinge of desperation that a lot of cartoons can have after going past the season 5 mark. That's why I think the argument that Bronies were responsible for this kind of falls apart, but I could see where they're coming from. I don't blame anyone who wasn't in the fandom for drawing that conclusion, because if you were in the fandom, you might remember that Bronies objected to a lot of these changes at the time they were implemented. It almost felt like viewers were constantly renewing their own skepticism about the show, or, I don't know, waiting for the bubble to burst instead of enjoying the ride. Fans disliked Twilight's ascension to princesshood, but when all was said and done, a lot of great stories came from it, and she was an alicorn for far longer than she was a regular unicorn. It made those involved with the show more comfortable with change, and being able to introduce new things and make long-lasting changes is what helped the show sustain itself for the second half of its tenure. The movie and the School of Friendship in Season 8 were criticized for being very simple yet convoluted ideas, but contributed to adding many new creative creatures and locales to the series, which would benefit in the long run. There were objections to how often villains and antagonists would be reformed or extended a hoof to change instead of getting zapped with rainbow lasers, but again, in the long run, it was emblematic of the philosophy of friendship and betterment through camaraderie that had been at the heart of the show since the very beginning. I wrote an editorial about that too, for anyone who might be interested, with the most clickbait title I've ever used. I don't regret that, but I did get called out for it, which is fair. Even Equestria Girls got a reevaluation as it went from a single film to a full spin-off series. Future projects would be much more well received, with EQG's exclusive character, Sunset Shimmer, once scoffed at as a cliche lacking depth, going on to become one of G4's most beloved characters. And throughout all of this, the show is still coming into conflict constantly with its more toyetic side. There's additions made to the cast through genuine and at times challenging storytelling to introduce ponies you can make new toys of. There's a long-spanning interconnected storyline that results in simple yet eye-catching redesigns you can make into easy toys and new playsets.
There's also supposed to be a castle that goes with it.
The rest of the castle is sold separately.
There is definitely an argument to be made that Friendship is Magic was fighting a battle to appeal to everyone that was watching. The little kids, the families, the teens and adults, brony creators online, and another forgotten demographic, kids as they were growing up. FIM is the longest spanning era of My Little Pony, running for 9 years from 2010 to 2019. That's half the time most people are considered kids, and an even smaller window of time when you're developing your own interests. While I don't deny that Bronies played a big part in the ambition attempted in the latter half of the show's run, I feel like there was also a vested interest in keeping the kids they hooked in early watching, who were maturing and needed more exciting ways to be entertained and more complex messages to mirror how the relationships in their own lives might be changing. After all, if you're the kind of series attempting to have long-lasting change and deep investment in your characters, which MLP was trying to do, it's easier to keep the audience you already have rather than trying to keep bringing in new viewers like most little kid shows do. So looking back, I think there were a lot more factors involved in the shift in what MLP became than just we talk to bronies at conventions and read their tweets, so that's the only feedback we're going to take in. But the brony influence is still unquestionably there, like there's no denying that. Crew on all fronts have confirmed that we were in fact being catered to just like the kids, even if it didn't always work.
And Hasbro was paying attention, guys. They really are.
Mm-hmm.
And on another note, for those of you that didn't like Equestria Girls,
it was all your
whatever,
fault. Oh my God, you have
fault.
no idea.
All that fan art.
Yeah, all the fan art of
that
the,
human eye,
the
that human
ponies
Equestria
is
that you wrote.
Hasbro looked at that and said, "Oh, this is what they want."
They have volumes of fan art
that they keep.
If you don't want it, don't make pictures of it.
This is what they're looking for. So you guys do have an influence. You really do. So
blame it on yourselves.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the following question. Was that detrimental to the show? Well, I think I can give some examples of episodes that were likely the result of brony influence, but still fit with the overall tone of the show. Season 5's Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep, Season 6's Stranger Than Fanfiction, and Season 7's the perfect pair. Do Princess's Dream of Magic Sheep treads ground we've talked about already because it's a Luna episode. However, ever since her return, she hasn't had that large a role. This episode takes time to explore her powers and responsibilities and how she balances that with the lingering guilt over who she was as Nightmare Moon. The dreamwalking the premise is built on allows for a lot of creative scenarios that indulges in callbacks and references that might appeal to the Brony viewer. Big Mac famously gets a magical girl transformation in this, and it's great, but it also delves into the destructive nature of guilt and self-loathing, using the magic inherent to the show to make such an invisible but ever-present menace more tangible. It's a more complex emotional problem than what the show tackled at first, and I don't think they would have been willing to go there if people weren't clamoring for more Luna. It not only gives Luna some much-needed exploration and closure, but the subject can really resonate with a lot of viewers, young and old, who might be having trouble dealing with similar issues. And something that can help with that, in a healthy way, is invaluable. Stranger Than Fanfiction is a bit more overt in being influenced by the older viewers. For one, it takes place at a convention Rainbow Dash is attending dedicated to her favorite action hero, Daring Do. That part is probably the result of the crew attending a lot of brony conventions, and they included some more specific references that no kid is going to notice until they hit their teens, look back at this, and go, oh. At the convention, she gets to know another fan there, Quibblepants, who's played by Patton Oswalt, by the way. They hit it off until they have a difference in opinion about Daring Do.
Whoa, there are no other books.
Of course there are.
I'm not saying those books don't exist. I'm saying that I refuse to acknowledge them.
Why?
Because they're horrible!
I think everyone who was very passionate about entertainment and interacted in fandom circles has been in this situation at least once. Getting into really heated arguments over whose opinion is correct. Quibble is arrogant and unmoving, and Dash goes to really extreme lengths to prove her point. But those differences don't have to ruin friendships. The story goes to great lengths to show that how they both feel about Daring Do is valid. Both points of view are part of who she is and why they love her adventures. At the end of the day, it comes from the same care and enthusiasm for the hero they both look up to, just in different ways. No ponies misreading the text here, they're just focusing on different parts of it, and as long as they're respectful of their differences, they can get along. I think it's great to have this in MLP to show this attitude to kids early on, and also to remind the older viewers what really matters when you get this passionate about something. Not to lose friends over your feelings on, I don't know, The Last Jedi or something. The Perfect Pair is a bit more abstract in my reasoning for its connection to the older viewers, but I do think it's there and worth discussing. When the crew are attending conventions or interacting on social media, they're gonna get some common questions, and there was one thing that every pony asked again and again and again. Where are Applejack's parents? Applejack is very close to her family. She helps run the family business and has a large farm pony family spanning all over Equestria. When we're introduced to her in episode 1, it's in the middle of a huge family reunion. Yet for all the focus on family, we never saw her parents. No sign they're still around, no one even talks about them. And when there are missing parents in a kids series, older viewers draw the logical conclusion, they did. People were begging for this to be addressed on the show, but I think we all knew deep down it wouldn't be. Sure, MLP tackled complex themes for their demographic, even death in an abstract way, but we're not going to deal with dead parents, are we? Yeah, so we dealt with dead parents. When they decided to do this, they had a really sentimental way of going about it, telling the story of how the Apple siblings' parents came together and the obstacles they had to overcome to stay together. You've seen this kind of love story before, but it's simultaneously heartfelt and somber, as their kids are told this story by their parents' old friends, reminiscing and sharing this part of their lives with their friends' children, and depicting the emotional theme that love, even love lost, can bring people closer together. They handle the story with incredible delicacy, but keep this memorial of an episode realistic. You spend the whole episode being endeared to Bright Mac and Buttercup, only to be reminded that they're no longer around. It doesn't matter how, what matters is the impact they left. And they left quite a large one, it turns out. I do feel like fans constantly telling them they want to know more about this side of the Apple family because they were genuinely curious, gave them the courage to go there in a way that was just right for anyone watching. It resulted in one of the most beloved episodes of the show, and currently the highest rated episode on IMDb. Little side note, this episode has 2 guest stars. Buttercup is played by Felicia Day and gets a really sweet song.
And even if the world tells us it's right.
in my head like a catchy song.
And her father, grandpair, is played by William Shatner because he tweeted about the show once. This was another thing that happened as MLP's popularity increased. A celebrity would make a reference to it and they'd almost instantly be asked to be on the show. It was awesome. Those are examples of episodes that were potentially inspired by brony trends and curiosities, but are still for anyone watching. But there are 2 episodes of MLP that are pretty blatantly just for the brony demographic. Season 5's Slice of Life, and Season 7's Fame and Misfortune. Time to yank the pin out, let's do this. Slice of Life is the big one that gets brought up all the time. The poster child for the show staff pandering to the brony viewers at the expense of the kids watching. It was the 100th episode of Friendship is Magic, centering around some of the other citizens of Ponyville as they get ready for a big wedding. The focus shifts between a bunch of different characters we'd only seen in the background of past episodes. Ponies that had been adopted by the fanbase in a sense. From the 2 music ponies being roommates to one pony just being the Doctor from Doctor Who, and I love him, to adopting popular fanon names, to Derpy. Just Derpy. This wasn't the first attempt at doing something like this. There were attempts early on to bring Derpy specifically closer to center stage as she became so beloved in the fandom. She became a Where's Waldo type character in season 2, and even got a speaking role in an episode.
Give me back my spotlight!
That didn't go over so well, though, mainly from parent groups who had an issue with Derpy's portrayal. That story is a bit too long for this video. Several people have talked about Derpygate. The point is, Slice of Life was their attempt to try again, to show appreciation for the community by giving Derpy another chance after how much the fandom loved and embraced her, doubly so after the controversy. If you ask me, Slice of Life is less trying to get bronies to clap at things they recognize, and more a celebration, appreciating just how rich and vibrant the world of Equestria, and especially Ponyville, is. Shifting the focus from the foreground of the main 6 to the background of static crowd ponies or side characters who don't get the focus often. A lot of the personalities the fandom developed weren't born from nothing. They were ignited by little quirks added into the background that fans built on from there. I realized writing this that, in a way, bronies were doing what kids had been doing with these ponies since the beginning, crafting their own stories and adopting incidental characters as their own. Bronies were practicing the very thing that's kept My Little Pony thriving as a franchise.
I take the mundane, the simple, the unappreciated, and I make it relatable.
Finding small things to latch onto and build stories from a single animation error to having a lot of importance but not much focus, to just having great eye-catching designs or being a pop culture reference dressed as a pony. This is where the Big Lebowski ponies made that appearance Anthony was talking about. Okay, first off, this is not their first appearance. They have a blinking you miss it cameo in a scene in this bowling alley in season 2 because someone on the team thought that would be funny, I guess. It was quick, it was harmless, but it gets a reaction in a if you know way. And MLP has tons of these across all areas of pop culture because it's funny. Off the top of my head, there's ponies for Breaking Bad, Elf, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. The Shining has 1 or 2. Rick and Morty, Wicked, Pulp Fiction a couple times. Sherlock, both modern and Victorian. I think there's a Gordon Ramsay pony, and way more. You get the idea. Why they have a feature role in this episode, I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's just another extension of something that's normally in the background getting center stage, but it's pretty inoffensive, all things considered. They don't do anything inappropriate like they would in the Big Lebowski movie. I have to assume I haven't seen it. I didn't even get this reference at 21, someone had to point it out to me. And guess what? It didn't affect my view of the episode. Look, maybe I can't come at this with an unbiased perspective because I was deep in the fandom at this point and got most of the references, but I think it's a fine episode for the kids too. Yeah, they might not understand why there's a whole episode for these ponies specifically, but there isn't a pony here who hasn't been on the show before. It's the whole freaking point. It could just be what it bills itself as. A story about the areas of Ponyville that rarely get the spotlight. An episode focusing on one-off characters is hardly an uncommon practice. And even if it was, it's one episode out of 222, guys. Okay? It does not change the show afterwards. The most it affects the series is that some of these characters get a few more appearances. Most were still in the background, and some of it is even gay, which is always a plus. So calm down. While Slice of Life is a celebration of how much bronies love this show, Fame and Misfortune is a bit more critical of the community, or at least the less savory, more critical side of it. You know, the kind of people who ask show staff the really entitled, obnoxious questions and think they know better than the people making the show.
Even I've learned more than she has. Why can't I be in the book?
Basically, Twilight publishes the friendship lessons her and the others have learned over the moons into a book, and it gets very popular. Ponies want signed copies to preserve, they pick favorites and obsess over them, they only look at some of the ponies through a certain lens, and are critical of every choice every one of them has ever made. It's hard not to see this as a critique of how some viewers engage with the show. This again isn't unique to MLP, shows have made episodes like this before and often get called out for it, as they did here because this is a very divisive episode. We could spend a while on just the reactions to Fame and Misfortune, but if you want a bit more insight into it, I'd recommend Silverquill's video on the topic. It's the best I've seen covering this. I can't lie and say that I couldn't see where the crew were coming from with this one. I've met these people and read these messages. Yeah, being bombarded by thousands of opinions on your work is just what creatives sign up for these days apparently, but no one could have predicted just how many eyes would be on the magical horse show. I feel I should also point out that this and Slice of Life were written by the same person, M.A. Larson, who has definitely experienced a lot of the highs and lows of this fandom. He was the poor soul who was assigned to write the Twilight Becomes a Princess episode, which created this catchphrase.
Twilight was better before she got wings!
Yeah, I think we had this coming. I think the crew earned a venting session, but one that they do flip into something positive. The episode ends showing that the ponies who understood what the lessons were about were two fillies whose friendship got stronger by taking those messages to heart. Some older fans took this as saying they weren't welcome to engage with the show, but it's not necessarily who is watching, but how they're watching it. A message to take a step back, breathe, and maybe see that the thing you're enjoying isn't perfect, and that's not a bad thing.
We want to know why Fluttershy keeps learning the same thing over and over again. Be assertive already!
Listen up. I am more assertive. It took me a while to get there. But can you honestly say that you could learn something one time and completely change who you are?
Tell it, girl! Speak the truth!
Now, I'm not here to say MLP isn't without criticism. They had poor writing, they had missed opportunities, they had insufferable strawman characters, they had botched or just bad messages. It wasn't perfect. No show is. But it was way better than it had any right to be, but just as good as it should have been. Kids need more shows like this, and Fame and Misfortune shows that maybe the adults could use a show like this too, if they're willing to use what the show offers to better themselves, even when it falls short, instead of proving that they are better than it through blind fanaticism. So, to answer the question this video started with, did Bronies influence Friendship is Magic as it went on? Undoubtedly yes. Every staff member who has ever been asked admits it. Was it in a way that hurt the show or swayed it away from its target demographic? I don't think so, because Bronies were drawn in by the same things they put in to appeal to the kids. Yes, there were Brony-specific references and a higher emphasis on more intense stories and stakes than the show started out with, but I think it was less giving the older audience what they wanted and more embracing what everyone was responding to. Nothing about the show was too different from anything that had been set up in the beginning. It's just the things people said they liked, young and old, got amplified and became recurring tricks of the trade. I mentioned standout episodes and story arcs, and I could definitely point out more, but in between those, a lot of the show was still business as usual. Antics and friendship lessons with pastel color ponies. Generation 4 of My Little Pony got to embrace being something it never had been before. An all-ages cartoon, like a Disney movie or a Cartoon Network show. You want to know the kind of thing I was watching as a 7-year-old girl? SpongeBob, Teacher's Pet, the Powerpuff Girls, Pokemon, any chance I got, which is still true today. See, that's the thing that bugs me about this whole ordeal, and I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but implying that having stuff like this, and that in a show like My Little Pony takes it away from its intended demographic kind of implies shows for girls can't be anything but a few specific things. I promise you, there are girls out there who this is perfect for. Girls have all sorts of things that appeal to them, and FIM has something that appeals to them all. Breaking stigmas around shows like this to appeal to so many people who were dismissive going in, including me. This isn't to say that anyone who enjoyed previous iterations are invalid or lesser, but I'm just saying, if I was a kid, this is exactly the kind of version of My Little Pony that would have made me give a damn about the franchise. It is so earnestly and unashamedly female, having fun and breaking boundaries while having the core ideals of compassion and inclusion. Probably the only downside to how MLP has such a wide audience, aside from some weird, creepy stuff certain bronies did, which is important to announce, but again, not the point of this video, is how it affected the MLP brand in the long run. Hasbro is still licensing out G4 stuff today and is having a real tough time letting this iteration go. But that's a better conversation for if I ever get around to making that G5 video. What I want to end with is this. MLP's final battle is resolved when creatures from Equestria and beyond, of varying backgrounds, upbringings, species, and ages, come together to protect each other, fight for what they believe in, and unite to uphold the virtues of friendship and compassion that made them all feel seen and welcome. The very same principle the show began with, but on a much, much grander scale, not believed possible when this journey first began. My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic changed in quite a few areas as it went along, but it never shied away from its core ideals and never forgot who was watching. Anyone who was sad, confused, struggling to understand the world around them, or just looking for something to brighten their day. Extending a hoof, sharing a laugh, teaching them how to live a better life, and telling every pony that this is a place for you.
Own it. Be proud of what you are. There is absolutely nothing wrong with liking little pastel-colored marshmallow pink ponies.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what your brony journey was like in the comments below. And hey, why not? Share your favorite pandering moment from the show. They threw the pandas, why not catch them? That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Jinx Productions and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.